Hello there and welcome back to Tranquility du Jour, nourishing conversations about living a full and meaningful life with doses of tranquility. This is episode 529. I'm your host, Kimberly Wilson, bringing you tranquility since 2005. Today we are talking about Paris letters, which, since I have not been able to get to Paris, and I think probably many of you, unless you live over in Europe, have not been able to get to Paris in a while, it's such a treat to have this connection with the lovely Janice MacLeod, who is sharing her new book, hot off the press, Dear Paris, The Paris Letters. We also talk about the beauty of watercolor because her watercolor images are so stunning. So I get all the scoop on this, and we talk about the joys and challenges of writing and 2 writing e-courses that she's currently hosting. Before we hear from the lovely Janice, who is a returning guest, so I'll be sure to link to our previous podcast interviews, subscribe in your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss an episode of Tranquility du Jour. And as you may know, this year I am alternating interviews with my own kind of just chats and musings. And so a big thank you to everyone for your feedback about the recent episode with me and Tim. It was so fun to do, and I'll definitely have to have him back on the show. It's just a fun way to connect and kind of give an inside peek as to everything that's going on in our world, because I know worlds are just a little different, very different right now. So again, thanks for all your feedback. Also, if you are new to Tranquility du Jour, check out KimberlyWilson.com/new for lots of fun scoop and resources. Also, save the dates. March 21st is our next TDJ Live Masterclass. March 27th is our TDJ Style Pop-Up, where I'm going to be talking all about creating and styling a capsule wardrobe. And then April 3rd is our next half-day virtual retreat. Would love, love, love to have you with us. And you can find links to all this in the show notes, which can be found at KimberlyWilson.com/529. Now, building on our tenets, this week is definitely creativity. So Janice is just kind of a walking billboard, I think, of creativity, from her gorgeous watercolors to her beautiful writing. So Janice is best known as a Paris artist. She's a New York Times bestselling author of Paris Letters, which, if you haven't read, is amazing. A book based on the creation of an illustrated letter writing service of the same name. She's also the author of A Paris Year, a travel journal about Paris, which was named one of USA Today's top most beautiful books. Janice and her family live in Port Dover, Ontario, Canada, and live in Paris part of the year. She considers any day creating art for her Etsy shop a day well spent. This is her 5th book. Welcome back, Janice.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
It's such a treat. I was thinking, is this number 3? I think it's number 3.
I think it is, because we do it usually when I have a new book coming out and I have my 3rd Paris book. So here we are. Nice to see you or hear you.
Nice to see you and hear you. So congrats on this new book, which looks freaking amazing. Dear Paris, the Paris Letters Collection. And, so tell us a bit about this. I think our listeners who have heard your previous podcasts, and listeners, I will put a link to the earlier ones if you haven't heard them, because they're very good. But tell us about the kind of the inspiration on bringing your Paris letters to life in this way.
Well, this book is a collection of all of the Paris letters that I have done over the last decade. So while I was in Paris, every month I would paint a picture and I would write a letter on it. And then I would send it out to people who subscribed to the service at my Etsy shop. And when I started it, it was a way to just make, little pocket money for my days in Paris, right? Just to kind of get by. But then it kind of grew, and then it grew a little more, and then it grew a little more, and then it became like the thing I do. And then it continued until I decided to stop doing it at the end of December 2019. And by then I had 140 letters I had a few more, but they're ugly, so I didn't include them. But I thought, I want everybody to be able to see these letters, even those who don't subscribe or because they're not able to subscribe anymore. So I mentioned it to my agent and she said, yep, I can make something happen, and got a publisher, and here we are. So it's the whole collection mostly, except for not the ugly ones.
I love in the intro and you're like, and if you have one of those and you don't see it in the book, burn it.
Yes, please do, because it's bad. But, I got better as time went on. And I also fixed a few of them, so there's a few that if you were a subscriber and you got this letter and then you see it in the book and it's different, I hope the book version is an improvement. That's my aim, because my skills did get better over time, I think. I mean, maybe you don't, other people, but I think I got better over time. So I fixed some of them, but some of them were just not worth it. They just made me bored or angry. So I thought, nope, you don't get to be in the book. Sorry, letter. Burn.
Well, I'm curious, kind of having done 140, which is a lot. Is there one or two that really stands out to you that maybe you got a lot of responses about, or was particularly one of your favorites?
I have one about me meeting an older lady in a cemetery. And she was, this is in my first book, Paris Letters, aptly named. And she was watering the flowers on her husband's grave. And I understood what she was saying because she was Polish, but spoke to me in French. And Christoph is Polish and speaks to me in French. So I understood what she was saying. So I could actually have a conversation with a local, which was a big deal. But she told me about her life. And I wrote about this in a letter. And I just thought, oh, it was so nice to be able to connect with these strangers in Paris. And I did notice that as I was going through the anthology, that my favorite ones are these little tiny weak links to strangers in Paris. The guy who sells me his old postage stamps at the postage stamp place. The lady next door who's always looking for her cat. I write these little vignettes of our relationship together, or my favorite bartender. And those become my favorite ones by far. Sometimes the art isn't as great. The ones with the Eiffel Tower on them, obviously, those are prettier, but the content of the ones with the people are my favorites. And, during these times when we're not seeing these strangers, you really miss these, the outer circle of your daily interactions with people, because we keep in contact with our friends and our family, but we don't know those people really well enough to keep in contact with them. And so I miss all of those random familiar faces that I can't see right now. And I don't even know their names, some of them, or how to find them.
No, it's such a good point, right? Because our pods, like our worlds have shrunk so much. And so, you don't talk to strangers now, you don't shake hands, you don't hug, it's one of those things where it will be interesting whenever we can get back to that and get back to the ability to connect beyond our pods.
Yes, absolutely. After the Paris attacks in November 2015, Christoph and I were in Calgary at the time, and he's like, I got to get back to Paris. Not because he had already contacted his friends that he knew on Facebook and ways to contact them. But he said, there's so many clients, there's so many colleagues that I only know from the street that I live on. And I got to go walk on the street to find them, to make sure they're okay. And he was so like, I got him. So his heart just went out to these strangers that you don't think you love until something like this happens. And then you really want to connect with them.
Absolutely. It's so funny kind of with the pandemic, there were people who I just knew their dog's name, right? Or, I would see them in passing regularly and haven't seen them since mid-March of last year. And it's one of those things you're like, did you move away? Are we just not passing one another at the same time? But it's weird. It's like, I miss these people. I don't know their names. I know their dog's name, but it's just like, it really, I think it's been a really interesting time to recognize the importance of these connections. And I love the story about the woman in the cemetery. I think it's moments like that we really remember.
Yeah. And, you don't realize also that those are the connections that lead to other connections that eventually lead to friendships. Like you think you're going to meet all your people through your close friends, but you end up meeting people through these tenuous little relationships. And when was the last time you met somebody new? I have no idea. I've been hanging out with the same 3 people.
Right. For like a year.
Yeah. You really got to go inward. Characters in books have become they've replaced those tenuous relationships.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you even say that because I'm sure you've seen Schitt's Creek, right?
Every episode at least 3 times. Yes.
So I just watched it over the holidays and I became obsessed with David. And when it was over, I was like teary. I'm like, what about David? How will I stay in contact with him? And you're like, okay, I can stalk him on Instagram and Twitter, which I do, but his name is Dan and he's fictional and he's not my best friend. And it's just like it is funny how, I think in any time I would have really connected with him, but I think in general now we're just like, oh my gosh, you seem like me. Let's hang out. Right. And
oh yeah,
they're fictional.
It's funny because especially with David, not Dan, but David, I think of what he would say or his reaction because he had so many of these isms throughout time. Of course, I rewatched when the last season came out. I rewatched all of them so that I could catch up to this season. And you see them all at the same time. And you do feel like, I've just been on vacation with David for the last month because I've been watching Schitt's Creek every day.
So listeners, if you have not seen it, if you were late to the party like I was, it is worth it. I even took photos at the wedding, Janice. I'm sitting there like snapping photos. I'm like, okay, A, this is not a real wedding. B, I'm not in attendance. You're just like, oh my gosh. So,
but you talk to people about it. Like, oh my God, there was the wedding. Wedding, like you were there.
Totally.
Yeah.
So funny.
Oh, Moira. It was so good. It was
Moira is amazing. So let's talk watercolor.
Sure.
Big old switch. So I'm curious, okay. And I appreciate what you said that it must have shifted for you, meaning it must have gotten better, right? Because the more you practice something, but like, oh my gosh, your watercolors are so gorgeous. And, I thought initially like, you just sit down and it just comes to you, but it doesn't. It is a skill set. And I'm curious, like, what's your training in it? Is it something where you're just like, I think I'm going to start watercoloring today? And then what tools do you need? So can you kind of walk us through, like, how do we become watercolorists, if that's a word?
This is an excellent question for me because I am not naturally talented in this regard. I'm a writer by trade and I'm a writer by passion, but the watercolor thing isn't as natural as writing. So, and I have taken classes. I did take a few classes in university, and then I've taken classes, night classes here and there when something looked good, when the course catalog ended up in my mailbox and I'm like, that looks good. I'll take that tonight because Tuesday nights at 7, I'm free. So I have done that. Okay. And you learn this and that in all these classes. But what you really learn in these classes is that you are not naturally talented and everyone else in the class is. And they just ooze an ability that is so natural and so not what I have. So the classes were good and it was good to sit down and do the thing. But truly for me, what I learned how to do it by using tracing paper. I would take a photo of a scene and I would print the photo on my printer, and then I would trace the outline of all the buildings or the people or whatever it is in the scene that I want to keep. I mean, I didn't always keep the ugly bits. If there was a yucky car, then I just, didn't trace that part. I just trace all of the other things. So I would trace, and then I would photocopy that traced thing onto watercolor paper, and then I would paint it. And I did that because I would mess up with my watercolor. I would often take it too far. So then I could start over because it was just a photocopy through my printer has become like an art tool way more than I expected it would be. I thought it would just be a watercolor and some pens and some pencils, but my printer, because I mess up. So then I print it again and I do it again. And that's how I learned how to do the watercolor thing, just by practicing the same scenes that I had drawn. And then I also I would scan things in, and I use PicMonkey, which is a lot like Canva, to create layers in, you have like the painting, but then you can also add bits of other paintings, like another drawing of a woman that I did that was quite good. Oh, I'm going to throw that in this painting. And I like the clouds I painted over here. I'm going to toss that in. And these are all scans that I layer in PicMonkey. And also the words. Then I would hand write the words, but you don't want to do that on an actual painting. I have done that and I've messed up, and then I've messed up the entire painting. So I have printed out or written out the letter, then scanned that in and made that a layer on top of my watercolor. So I have all these layers. And what I like about PicMonkey, this PIC monkey, is that it's free. I mean, there's a premium option, but when you're starting out, you don't want to be buying Adobe subscriptions from hundreds of dollars a month. Like, I don't know if this is going to take off. I'm just fooling with it. So PicMonkey, the majority of what you need it for is free. And Canva is another one. We've all probably heard of that. And it's the same deal. I just happen to use PicMonkey because I like it. And so that's how the whole art behind all the Paris letters inside Dear Paris, it's all mess up, fix, layer, mess up, fix, fiddle, layers, and then finally a product at the end. But that's how I would do it. That's because it wasn't a natural talent for me, but I really liked when something great would happen, but that magic just wasn't as natural to me. So I had to kind of retrofit like whatever I could in order to make the art that I could see in my head, but I couldn't get out of my hands.
This is so helpful because I pictured you at a cafe sitting down with your watercolors and your pen and doing it one shot, right? Like that makes so much sense. You take a photo, you do tracing paper, you remove the bits you don't want. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so helpful. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad it's helpful. And I have sat down at cafes and I have done some paintings, and some of those paintings do end up in the Paris letters. But first of all, there's people everywhere, or pandemic aside. You need your shoulders to be able to pull this off, which I didn't realize until I was crammed into a cafe in Paris, realizing that I don't have shoulder width. Like I need my elbows and shoulders in order to draw and paint. So I'd get frustrated. So I would do a little bit of it, but then I'd take a picture of the scene and then deal with it at home, because I just needed the space, the physical space to do it. And also some of the, there's this one Paris letter. It's two statues looking at each other and they are at an intersection. So I can't sit in the middle of the intersection and do this drawing or sketch. So what I would do is when the light would turn green, I would go to the middle, take a picture, go to the edge, let it turn red, turn green again, come back, take another picture. And I did that so that I could get the right picture and then go home and deal with it on a rainy day.
Love it. No, that's so helpful because I guess you could take like postcards or, anything and trace it, right? It's like, that's
Yeah.
so smart.
Yeah. And when you have your own photo, and the photos, I should mention, I had two cameras. First, I had my phone because the best camera you have is the one you have with you. And then I also had this other Canon, I don't even know what it's called, but it's a point and shoot, but it's the most expensive point and shoot you can get, like the smallest for the best lens, because it got more details than my phone would, but it was small. All these people, so many people have visited me in Paris with their giant cameras, and they end up coming out the first day with their giant camera, and then they leave it in their hotel room because it's just too much to take. It's just too heavy and too annoying. But with your phone, nobody really notices. Everyone else is out there with their phones. A small little camera. I didn't get too technical. It had to be kind of scrappy, free online tools, except the camera was pricey, for me, but I used my wedding money. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for coming to my wedding. Thank you for the gift. I'm going to go buy myself a camera.
And then for tools, I guess it's like watercolors and like a special pen.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Watercolors. I was in a town in Yorkshire Dales called Kirby Lonsdale because I was visiting my cousin who was there. So I zipped up there and visited her, and we were walking around, and I saw a really nice looking set of watercolors, and that looks all right. Let's give that a go. And then I bought a lot of paintbrushes because that's what you do. You go overboard. And now I'm down to 2 paintbrushes. And of those 2 little paintbrushes, I use one. And the one it's kind of cut at an angle, and it's very small. And I do almost everything with this one tiny little paintbrush. And I add colors to my paint set once in a while, but mostly because I come across it and I think, oh, let's give that a go. But I've never found the perfect purple paint ever. I don't know what it is with purple, but purple and watercolor is so annoying. So you have to mix your own. And anyway, but the paint set wasn't a big deal. It's amazing that I've done all these paintings for 10 years, every month, a new painting with one paint set that I got ages ago. You can really stretch these things out. And then the pen, I use a pen called the Uni-ball Vision, and I get it from Staples. The Uni-ball Vision Micro. And I use pencils that I have kicking around. And I use one of those bone folding, it's just a fold paper, because when I do note cards, I fold all the note cards, and I have this little bone folder, and I have a pair of scissors, and there you go, and a printer.
Love it. And tracing paper.
And tracing paper. People think that they are cheating if they use tracing paper. Oh, and another hot tip is tracing paper on your iPad. You see a picture you like that you've taken on your iPad, you just put the tracing paper right on top of it. You don't even have to print things out, and then trace it.
Love
Easy.
It. Oh my gosh, that's so great.
With an iPad, you can actually use some watercolor, your watercolor, if it's thin enough, your watercolor paper, you can see through enough to trace. Also, watercolor paper. I use the cheap stuff from the dollar store. It's volume, people. I need volume. And I've seen watercolor paper at art stores, and it's so expensive. And I think, I'm not that good. I can't invest in this. So I get a notebook of watercolor paper at the dollar store, and I just rip pages out of it. And that's how it all goes. There
Amazing.
you go.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
You got to be scrappy.
You do have to be scrappy. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and they are absolutely stunning. So let me ask you this. You are currently offering 2 writing courses, book writing and a writing year. So tell us a little bit about these and kind of the impetus to bring these to the world.
it's all based on interviews that I've been doing over the past, I had 2 books come out, Paris Letters and a Paris Year, and now this new one. So I've had a lot of interview questions, and they're all the same. And I've also had a lot of people email me because I'm very accessible. I'm an Etsy seller, so you can email me right then. And a lot of people ask me these questions, and they're all the same questions. And I thought, well, I got to just pull this together for everyone. So the book writing, and I think maybe it is because I am so accessible to people that they feel they can ask me a lot of questions, right? Because I will answer, I will return, eventually get back to you. So I kind of pulled all, and I have a lot to say. I know a lot of things about book writing over time. And I also listen to a lot of author interviews, and I'm like, oh, they're all asking all the same questions. So pulled all that together. And I thought, what I would like to do? I would like to do a writing course because, as I mentioned before, that is my natural tendency. The art and the painting is not my natural tendency, but the writing truly is. Like, I do feel that there is something beyond myself whispering certain ideas in my direction, and somehow my frequency can pick that up. So I have this book writing course, and it is technical stuff as well as craft. Like, people, as soon as they say, I'm going to write a book, all they want to know is, how do I contact an agent? Before they write a word, before they have any idea. So I kind of bring them back in this course and say, all right, we're going to start from the beginning. I would like you to write a book. Someone asked me once, how do you write a great book? Or no, how do you get a New York Times bestseller? And I said, first, you write a great book. And it was like the mic drop. Oh,
that's
like
the
it was
secret.
That's the secret. Like, there was like some magical kind of analytics thing you could do in the background. I'm like, you know what? First, you write a great book. And like, this person who asked me had never heard of this before. I'm like, that's how you do it. Start with writing the great book. So the book writing course is all about starting that process. And there's certain things that you have to do. You have to walk every day. You have to write in your journal every day. You have to type something in a manuscript every day. And you have to read every day, because all the books at the library, they already won. They won the big prize. They're already published. They're already out there. So they've already been through this process. So you find your favorite books, and that gives you all these clues on the kind of book you want to write. So it's going well. People are really asking, another set of great questions, which are fun to answer. And then every week I answer the week's questions in a video so that we can all learn from each other. So that's the book writing course in a nutshell. And then a writing year is a year-long writing program where you get a lesson every week, a writing lesson, or a prompt, not a lesson. I'm not teaching subject and predicate. I'm not even sure that I could really teach that.
I was like, huh.
No one ever asks me technical questions. I do often think people get confused about semicolons, and I say, yeah, all my favorite writers don't use semicolons, and the only time you see it in my writing is when an editor put it in there, because I'm not sure myself. But anyway, those are boring lessons. And the best way to learn, I think, is to read your favorite books, and it's more entertaining for you anyway, and it should be easy. But a writing year, it's just really inspiring writing every week, so that when you sit down to your journal, you have some little hook to get you started. And it might not end up being, you might not stick to the same subject, but it's a warm up, because I think that when we write every day, that triggers life events. You can do some healing, you can get creative, and that can lead you in the direction of your dreams. It certainly did for me, because I started this whole thing by deciding to write in my journal every day for a year. And it led to 3 books. It led to a successful Etsy thing. and these writing courses. So anyway, I'm there to help these people along too. People who may not want to write a book, or maybe they want to write a book and they're not really sure, but they're going to start writing in their journal. We're going to see how that goes. So it's so fun because people write, such painful but beautiful things in the little comments, and we have this great little group happening. And I do think, gosh, I might be a teacher. Never thought that was going to happen, but maybe I have a teaching thing happening now that there are learning platforms that make it fun. I'm not going to say easy. I spent two months just figuring out how to do the learning platform, crying on the floor. Why won't my video load? But I got there.
Kajabi, right? You use Kajabi? Yeah.
I use Kajabi, but that's only after trying out a lot of them. Trying out and finding that some learning platforms are fine, but clunky looking. And I do have a certain aesthetic that I like. So, I want it to look slick. So Kajabi, it does cost more per month if you're interested in doing a course online, but it's slick and it's kind of cool looking and it's easy for me now. So not as much of a ramp up. They have a very good tutorial system, awesome videos. So I could just 2 minutes get the answer I need. And there is always somebody that quickly answers my question, an actual person. So anyway, I do use Kajabi, but I've tried a lot of them. And some of them are really clunky and ugly. And I don't want it to be ugly. I want it to be pretty.
Well, and I think what's so great about this, because I do see you as a teacher. I mean, it makes sense because, to just notice, okay, what are the questions I get repeatedly? I don't know if people ask you a lot about, how do I learn to watercolor? But, clearly people are asking you a lot about writing. So it's well, let me create a resource for people. And I think that's why a lot of people even write books, it's let me create this resource based on various questions that I get repeatedly, because clearly people are curious and would like to know.
Oh, yeah. And your question about the tools, the actual tools you use to actually do the art, big question for people. And, if I had 10 things, if I could only have 10 art supplies, scissors, would be one of them. Uni-ball vision micro pen, things, easy things, printer. Nobody thinks of a printer, but a printer, God.
Important. And, that's actually,
yeah.
You're who knew?
I know.
But, that's my next question I actually have here is what are your favorite writing tools? Because you do talk about this in the book writing course. Mm-hmm. And I do think a lot of people can get stuck with the tools. It's like back in the day when people went to gyms, whenever you were okay, I'm going to start working out, right? And you go buy all the workout clothes, but you never go to the gym, right? So you probably get this question a lot though. What tools do I need? It's okay, well, we have to start writing, but mm-hmm. if you want to get some tools, here are some basic ones. And so what would you say those are?
Oh, yeah, I know, because I had a bit of a rant recently about Scrivener on my book writing course, because a lot of people have asked me about Scrivener, which is this a website where you can put all of your information in here and store it all and then reshuffle. And I remember saying, just stop reshuffling things. Just one document, stop it. I know they're going to contact me and say, stop bad-mouthing us. But anyway, okay. First of all, the easiest tools are the best tools. So 1, you need a word processing situation. So you need a computer with a nice little keyboard. Okay. So you need to be able to type a book, because the end product for a writer is actually an electronic document. And I know this is the most basic, obvious thing, but people are like, what? Let me get a pen. I got to write this down. I need a computer. Yeah, you need a computer, but you do need a computer with a really great keyboard that makes you very happy. I have a Mac. I like Macs, and I really like the Mac keyboard. Probably because that's probably why I go with the Mac, because I love the keyboard because it makes me happy and it's good for my wrists. You also need the document. So I use Microsoft Word or I use Google Docs. I use one document and then I make page breaks. And then those page breaks end up being like the chapters of the book. And then I slot things in as I figure them out. But people think, do I need a lot of documents, like a chapter? Each chapter gets its own document. And I think, oh, that's exhausting. Just one document. Line breaks, and then title each line break, this is where he meets her on the street, or this is where they kiss, or this is where this happens, or this is where that happens, so that you yourself can see where you're supposed to slot those scenes in. Also, a journal. I use the, I don't know if it's a Pika. I still don't know. A Pika twin ring journal. And I love it. And I've used it for years. And a new shipment of 20 of them just came in. And I was like, Christmas time for me. I love them because they're spiral bound. So all the pages lay flat. I mean, there's 1,000 reasons why I love this journal. But I love it. And you can get it anywhere, they're kicking around. And then the Uni-ball Vision Micro, I've already mentioned that. And then books you love, because you have to read books you love. And it all has to be easy and fun. Even when it's painful, it's kind of fun, like a loose tooth.
Like a loose tooth. But you just keep pushing around.
Yeah. Assuming assuming it's a tooth. What are they, like a kid's tooth, like a
right.
What am I thinking? Like a baby tooth. Gosh.
Right, baby tooth. Yes,
baby tooth, not an adult tooth. That's another problem. But very simple stuff. Very simple. People always ask me, "What tools do you use?" And there you go: journal, pen, computer, Microsoft Word, or Google Docs. I'm kind of switching over to Google Docs right now because I do slideshows for my writing courses. And so it's easier to just switch and back and forth in there, but whatever turns your crank.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, Pages, right? Pages.
Yep. Pages too. Yeah. Yeah. And I have used Pages before on a few iterations. It's just that in fact, my second book, A Paris Year, I started in Pages. And then eventually they wanted a Microsoft Word doc. Oh, no, not for that one. No, they wanted an Adobe thing. So I had to pony up for Adobe Business. But that's another graphic design headache you don't have to talk about here.
Right.
It's expensive and complicated.
Yes. That's the beauty of things like Canva these days, right?
Oh, yes, I love it.
Well, the other thing I was going to ask before my final question is like, how do you organize your content? But you kind of already just answered that because, people do buy that fancy software system, Scrivener, but it's like, it sounds like you do one big document and then you'll put in places where you're like, okay, come back and write deeper into this scene.
Yes. I also forgot to mention another thing, which is the index cards, which I obsess over. Just index cards or big Post-it notes, and I put ideas on those. And when the idea comes, I write it on an index card, and then I have it kind of in a pile. And then at some point, I insert that information into the Word document, as I said, and then I throw the index card away. And it is very satisfying to see that pile go down, and then I get another pile of index cards, and then insert the information. And sometimes the information is like, read that article from The Atlantic that inspired this idea. And then, okay, then I know, okay, I'm going to go read that article again. And what was it about that article? And then add whatever idea comes from that into my document. But people ask a lot about organizing content because nobody wants to get overwhelmed. You don't want it to be all research because then it gets tiring. You don't want it to be all index cards because that gets tiring. You don't want it to be all, piles and piles of journals that you have to sift through because that gets tiring. So when you got a good idea, you slid it in where it's supposed to be in the document, and then you toss it away. Even if you put it in a box, it's away.
Right, right. It's not like in the two right setting,
Yeah.
or
Yes.
pile, right? It's
Yes.
like it's in the document. It will be written at some point, but it's can be set aside. And I'm curious, I don't think I've ever seen this, and there may not be an actual number, but how many scenes should be in a book? Right. I mean, and I know it would vary a lot, but I'm just curious, have you ever seen anything like that? Like you should have 3 scenes per chapter or
Oh, a similar question I get asked is how many words should the book be? That is a big question, a little more than how many scenes per chapter, but because a chapter tends to, sometimes they're longer, sometimes they're shorter. I like short chapters because I read in bed and I want to read something fully and then the end of the chapter, and then I've been given a break and then I can go to bed. So I don't really like a long chapter, but that's me. That's just my preference. Publishers have told me, between 80 and 100,000 words. They've said that, but of course it's all sizes. And even when I've given them 80 to 100,000 words, they like chop a whole bunch of them out. So then they're like, nope, it's too expensive. We got to get it under 300 pages or whatever by the time it's all laid out. Like my book, A Paris Year, is supposed to be 365 days of the year. And I had to chop out like the weekends because it had to be under 300 pages. So I had to chop out stuff, which is fair enough. I mean, it's a business. Everybody's got to make money. And then in that case, it brought me too high. The price of the book was too high for them to make. So in order for them to make it, I had to chop. So I say you write until it feels complete. And then you go back to the beginning. Then you add in all of your gems. Then you go back to the beginning and then you take out all the boring bits. And then your book is done. Whether that's 3 scenes per chapter or not, I don't know.
Yeah. No, beautiful. Thank you. It is. It's funny because you hear 40,000, 60,000, 80. So interesting that it's like 80 to 100. I mean, this just seems like so many words.
It does, but it's not real. I think they get answered. I asked that question, so they just give the answer. But I'm still not believing them. I still don't believe them. So that's what they say. And I still think I got to write the book from the beginning until the end. That's how long it's supposed to be. The end is the end.
The end is the end.
Yeah, but it's hard to get there. It's hard to get there for some people.
Yes. Well, so my last question for you, Janice, and this probably, having been on the show before, is the name of the podcast, Tranquility du Jour. And so I'm curious, how are you finding tranquility right now with everything that you've got going on?
Oh, yes, because since I last talked to you on a podcast anyway, I have a daughter now. And so tranquility. Oh, I miss it. I miss it so. Tranquility. Daycare is still open. I mean, it wasn't open for a really long time, but now it's back open. So thank God for daycare. Thank God. Because I can't play with her in the same way that she needs other toddlers to play with her. So that is one thing. Sending her off to daycare and I'm like, oh, you're covered for the day and I don't have to be responsible for entertaining you. Also, during this time, truly, I've been rereading my favorite books. I have been reading a few new books, certainly because, things come along. But man, it has been such a comfort to read books from my favorite authors that I have read before, because one, I get more out of it than I did the first time around. And second, it's that friendship thing that is missing. This kind of relationship at the periphery of life. I get to visit that person and those characters. So I've been rereading a lot of my favorite books. Plus, they're also here in my house, so I don't have to go out and get them. But even my Kindle app that's full of books, I've been rereading all the highlighted bits, and it's been giving me some tranquility, of course. And then there's been a lot of hot beverages. A lot of tea. Because without our daily lives the way they were, I'm noticing I need punctuation in my day. Otherwise, it's just too long. It's too much. So making tea, making coffee, and making tea again. Like I have all these teas now. I just keep collecting teas. It is a punctuation in the day. And that somehow makes me feel like, I don't know, accomplished in some way.
Absolutely. You know, I love what you just said because the day can really go on, right? I mean, in a way, you're not coming home from work, people who used to go into an office, or, you know, the day is just very different. And so people are finding that they're working a lot longer and, you know, not kind of taking their personal time. And so I love that you have, you know, kind of thought about these rituals to set up as quote unquote punctuations in the day. It's beautiful.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that reminds me. Insight Timer, which is an app that it's a meditation app. Totally loving that too, because I'm like, I'm going to meditate now. I've got 4 hours ahead of me. What to do first? I'm going to do 10-minute meditation. And it's so great to have these little tools. I mean, we are lucky to have a pandemic at a time when we have all this great technology. I've been really utilizing all of it, and I'm so glad for it.
Insight Timer, amazing. And listeners, I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Well, thank you as always, Miss Janice. It's always a treat to have you on the show, and congrats on your new fabulous book.
Thank you. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention to you. You had sent me a few dresses. I had cancer a few years ago, and you had sent me a few dresses from your collection, and I wore them all the time because you're so uncomfortable in your skin during chemo and radiation and surgery. And I was so grateful to have your dresses to just be comfortable on my skin. So thank you very much for that. Gosh.
You are so welcome. I tell you that it's like so soft. You know, what do they call it? Like the cashmere of the jungle or something like that, because it's organic bamboo. And so, yeah, I'm so glad that you liked it and it was helpful.
And now these things are on trend. All the ads you see, they're all comfort, loose clothing, comfortable. It's all coming. It's all coming. Your line is coming. It's all on trend.
It's all on trend. Yes. Luxe loungewear, I think, is how it's kind of framed, right?
Oh, yes.
So it's like fancier jogging pants.
Yeah, exactly. So you still look good when, you know, you're at home. You feel
good.
You feel good. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It is always a pleasure.
So in the show notes, you'll find a link to Janice's Instagram, Facebook, and her website. Also, a reminder, if you are not in the TDJ Insiders Facebook group, for those of you who are on Facebook, would love to have you over joining us. We're reading a wonderful book right now, Maggie Smith's, who's a poet, book called Keep Moving. And also, I like to share resources and inspiration that you won't find elsewhere over in the Insiders Facebook group. Of course, I do the same for people who subscribe to the Love Notes, and you can do that at KimberlyWilson.com/Love Notes. So get a little dose of love into your inbox each week. Also, you'll find a link to my 6 books and planner and ways to follow along on social, and a link to my locally sewn eco-friendly clothing line that Janice and I talk about at the end of the interview. So I wish you a wonderful week ahead. If you have a moment to leave a review of this podcast, I would be so, so grateful. And thank you, as always, for sharing your day with me and my guest. Have a great week. Namaste.